On First to the Best, we get to review the often overlooked or forgotten first film by some of cinema's best directors. We'll discuss how these legendary directors got their first opportunities to make their mark in cinema. These are the movies they cut their teeth and learned the filmmaking ropes of Hollywood. We'll take a look at how these filmmakers' careers evolved from here, as well as their signature style, cinematic trademarks, and thematic ideas that may have been prevalent right from their very first chance in the director's chair. So join Cinema Gulp in an appreciation for filmmakers that once you get a taste, we know you'll say,
Once it hits your lips, it's so good!
The first episode for this new show, we're gonna talk about my favorite filmmaker, James Cameron, and his first film, Piranha 2, The Spawning.
But first, we're going to talk about my favorite filmmaker, Kathryn Bigelow, and her first movie, The Loveless. A lot of things about this movie to digest. It was filmed in 1980. When you look for it, it'll say The Loveless, in parentheses, 1981, but it was actually released in 1984 in a festival in 1982. So yeah, it's The Loveless, the early 1980s is what we'll call it.
Kathryn Bigelow co-directed this when she was 29 years old. And it shows it's a beginner project that's kind of written all over it. It's a learning experience. Co-directed it with possibly the best name ever, Monty Montgomery. Co-wrote it and directed it. She went to grad school in the film program at Columbia, where she studied theory and criticism and earned her master's degree there. She's a Cali native born in San Carlos. One of her first efforts in film was a short film called The Setup, which was like a 20-minute deconstruction of violence in film, which is really interesting. I haven't seen it, but that is very intriguing because of she's been such a big presence of violence in film.
Yeah.
She's glorified it. She has dissected it. She's villainized it. She's done everything with violence. So I'd really be interested in seeing this little 20-minute short docudrama thing that she did. Yeah, and after this film, you know, she really hit the fucking gas pedal and started meeting all the future collaborators. I really enjoyed watching this movie, even though I wasn't sure what I was watching. Because I was still seeing things in it. I was seeing shots in it where I'm like, oh, you know what? The near dark shot kind of looks like that.
Yeah.
A lot more about how her earlier career looked like than it does maybe in the 90s where she got really action oriented. The thing that I was most curious about in this movie, going into it after like doing just basic like IMDb research on it, was the fact that it was edited by someone named Nancy Cantor. And when you IMDb Nancy Cantor, she has an extraordinary career. Amazing. None of which are editing past this movie. This was the only movie she ever edited. First and only movie she ever edited. She became a huge producer in children's television, being one of the biggest names in The Muppet Show and Sesame Street and later like the Elmo stuff.
Okay.
So she probably made a fuckload of dough just in a totally different arena than editing film. So when I looked at her thing, I'm like, that is so bizarre that she became this really big, important person like Sesame Street and stuff. Because you think about how long Near Dark was after this movie.
Yes, there's a long stretch there.
Very long stretch. Like maybe she was writing.
Kathryn Bigelow is not someone I know every detail about her trademark style throughout her career, but there were things that, like you said, you could definitely see shots that felt like Near Dark in some of the earlier work. I guess Blue Steel is the next film, and that one actually already starts veering into that same mold as Point Break a little bit, I would say.
It's not as actiony as the preview made it think.
Yeah.
It's not that actiony, but that is where.
But it's got the blue Cameron lighting and stuff like that.
And I mean, it is puking blue camera.
Yeah, I mean, it's Blue Steel. You gotta expect it. That opening shot, we both said how great that deep focus of that long ride up this road with his motorcycle.
The first 5 minutes is probably my favorite 5 minutes of the movie, which is just him on his motorcycle and then him sort of like quasi helping like that girl,
helping,
the woman,
molesting. I mean, it's the 80s, you know.
The shots and the fast pacing and like the song that was playing. It was kind of one of the only scenes that had like a payoff.
Yeah.
Where it's like by the end of like he's changing her tire, but he's acting like a slime ball. So we're like, oh, is he just like that weird biker with a heart of gold? And then you're like, oh no, he's not. He's a piece of shit.
This biker gang rolls into town. One of them needs to get their bike fixed, so they kind of spend a day fixing the bike. And the rest of them are hanging out either in the diner or they end up at a bar late at night or cruising around town with this young girl that's kind of available to William Dafoe, and he goes on a little ride with her.
This was Bigelow's first movie, but this was not her first studio movie. That was Near Dark. Near Dark was where she ended up meeting lots of collaborators that she would work on for a long time. Obviously, James Cameron is a big name, but I think her most important collaborator that she met in Near Dark was Howard Smith, who also happens to be my favorite editor. I have 2 or 3 favorite editors, and sometimes they're interchangeable. But he does some amazing work, and he did some amazing work for her in Near Dark. He did not edit this film, which is why the editing feels so jarring in certain moments, because he probably could have taken this movie and done something extraordinary with what he had through editing. Like, I love that movie, The Limey. Why is it good? Because the editing is so cool. There's nothing happening.
Is he the editor of that movie?
He's not, but it's the idea of like, just take some simple thing and like, can you make it beautiful and can you push a story out of nothing?
Yeah.
And obviously this person probably is great at handling Big Bird and all that shit, but like, she probably maybe just didn't know how to do that stuff. But and I don't know what happened between Howard Smith and Bigelow. There's things in this movie that like feel like her more so in Near Dark, you know?
Yeah.
Probably because so much of it is just one kind of like simple closed-in location of like a country, a town out in the country or whatever. I don't really know where it was supposed to be. It seemed like it was supposed to be between maybe New York and Florida somewhere. All the exterior shots are really cool. Good use of like daytime lighting and natural lighting, and I don't know, the stuff that takes place in the diner that went on for so long, like what is fucking happening? And I just think the script was the problem. I think there's decent filmmaking on display, probably done by her.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but
some really cool shot selection.
Actors yet?
Yeah,
because she's really good at handling actors in her career at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
The music, the level of the music becomes this strange thing where it's just not cutting with the scene, and when people leave the diner, they cut to other music immediately, and it sometimes is jarring, and so it's like a love or hate with the music in this movie, but by the end, it kind of played itself out. It was more, like you said, the first few minutes of this movie are the most interesting, and everything that we're kind of liking at the beginning starts to play itself out as the movie goes along.
Because you think it's starting out that way, but it'll eventually kick into gear. Kind of like Blue Velvet. Like, it took its time, it was quiet, it was slow, everybody was eerie and kind of like just kind of going through the motions, but then it like picks up, you know, and like things start happening. This one, it just kind of stays in that first gear from the beginning of it almost devolves from that first scene. But it has that like feel, that surrealness of like the characters don't seem real and the camera doesn't quite know how to frame them at times, and that makes them kind of odd. It does that a little bit, but again, aside from like the dad who goes nuts and wants to kill people, no one feels like a over-the-top character aside from him, you know? Obviously, if you remove the bikers, then you don't have anything going on. But if you remove them from the situation, not the movie, but the situation, then they really don't do anything. Because if the story just really revolves around someone who comes into it halfway throughout, which is the young girl, and then she basically says, like, my dad, like, molests me and I'm like the town whore or whatever, and he catches her with a dude and then she shoots him later because she's fed up with his shit. That could have happened without any of the bikers there, because nothing really triggers him. But again, it was a competently made movie as far as like shot selection.
Yeah.
And it's not like a big mess. It's just kind of aimless, I guess, you know. But maybe the aim was to make a movie, get it made, and then go, okay, I can do this. Now let's make a real movie.
I feel like that's what a lot of these first efforts are, is just to prove to themselves, to learn the ropes, and prove to themselves, I know what I'm doing behind the camera, and what I shoot will cut together.
You know, a lot of people think that the first movie a director did is the first one they've heard of, or the first big one. These ones, you have to dig for these. I've got such a great respect for Kathryn Bigelow. She lets her fucking talent and her skill set and her creativity and her drive to make movies, she doesn't need to go and ask somebody to direct a movie. She's like the fucking Christopher Nolan of female directors. She makes what she wants to make. Kind of just always snuck and grown up in all these movies and become this action director where people didn't even know that she directed Point Break, but they just were like, "Oh, this movie's crazy," and it's like she fucking directed that movie. It's like, and it was always under the radar. It was never like, hold up her hand, oh, a woman directed this. It didn't. It didn't matter. It was just a filmmaker at the helm making fun movies. So I always respected her for that and admired her because she's very meticulous. She's very like detail oriented. Like everything she does, even tackling action, like getting that small taste for it in some of the car chases and stuff like that in like Near Dark. Do you remember when like Point Break came out? You know, there's no internet or anything, but it was always on the news because like, oh my God, they did these like real parachuting stunts and like the crazy stunts, you know, it's like that stuff was crazy. Like people were jumping out of those planes without parachutes on. And I think her films are brilliant, but I love the way she's gone about her career. And, you know, she does Blue Steel and she does, you can almost call the, you know, Point Break like a companion piece. Not that they're anything like, but they have that slickness to them.
Yeah.
You know, they have that slick drive to them. And then when you get to my favorite film of hers, specifically, I mean, and arguably my favorite film, Strange Days, that's when she's like gelling it up and just using so much primary color. It's never distracting. It's fucking pops in every direction. That's her, to me, will always be her most ambitious movie. Like even if people go, oh, well, you know, Detroit was pretty crazy, and I love Zero Dark 30. It was my favorite movie that year, 2012. But you can't say Strange Days is not her most ambitious movie. It's so unique. It's so, and to me, that movie has every trademark that she has.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
It has the camera work. It has the like, let's go crazy gobo, let's go nutty lighting, let's get the talent, because at that point she was so good with talent, with talking to actors on screen. And then she had done several movies with Smith, who knew how she wanted that movie to work, how the action scenes have to feel slick like Point Break, but then it has to be melodic when there's transitions. And that's the coolest thing about Strange Days is like it goes through these long periods of like, not montage, but just like showcasing what's going on in this fictional 99 in 95. And yeah, and just creating this whole world with all the fucking expressive colors and slightly over the top acting. Like that's the one where she just nailed everything about her. And then after that, I think she did K-19 The Widowmaker. I should just call it Harrison Ford's Russian accent.
Russian accent movie.
But I think that's when what you said, when after that is when she jumped into this different evolution. Zero Dark 30 is one of those movies kind of like I was talking about the Limey. You have to take a subject matter and through the editing you got to make the story flow, because that's like a 10-year period of time, that movie, like looking for Bin Laden.
Yeah.
And that could be very boring if you're focusing on like a single CIA agent who's just like pushing papers and that movie is just constantly nail biting to me. Strange Days is the one that kind of turned things around for me and definitely made me want to like at least find out more about editing. You don't really know you want to be an editor from looking at a movie. It's not until you sit down and edit something for fun and then you go, oh, wow, I can construct that.
Yeah.
I can make that work. She doesn't need people to go, hey, go over here and look at what this woman filmmaker's doing. She lets her movies speak for themselves. That's what I love about you, Mrs. Bigelow. So that was Kathryn Bigelow. That was The Loveless, otherwise known as Breakdown, as it was originally written in the script, and in Sweden known as Black Leather.
Interesting, because my film that we're going to talk about in Sweden was known as Pariah 2, De Flagrande Mordana.
That's much different.
Or in Denmark, Vampire Fisking. All right, so let's talk about Piranha 2, The Spawning, This Time They Fly, James Cameron's directorial debut. This is a film that he was fired from, only shot 4 or 5 days on it. So technically there's another guy behind the camera for most of this film. He doesn't get the credit, but you do have to call it a co-directed film to some degree. Sure. There was an Italian producer named Ovido, fuck his first name, I don't even know how to say this. His last name is Assonitis, which sounds kind of painful. Sounds like something you should have a doctor look
Absolutely.
at. He had a deal with Warner Brothers to make Piranha 2 for $500,000. He wanted to skim some money and only make it for $300,000. But the deal was that he was contractually obligated to have an American's name on the film. So that's how not really how James Cameron got the job. Some other dude who worked with Joe Dante on the first Piranha was given the job. The studio didn't really like his ideas for the film, so they fired him pretty quickly. They bumped up James Cameron, who had been hired to do the special effects on the film. So he had already done some second unit directing with Roger Corman on some films, and so basically he was kind of, through Roger Corman, he was the next guy basically that they were willing to give this opportunity. But this Asonitis guy really just wanted to hire a director who was a first-timer that he could easily push aside and direct the film himself, which he had already done a couple times before. It was kind of something everybody knew about this guy. So basically when Cameron shows up for the job in Jamaica, he finds out that none of the sets are done, there's no locations secured, basically nothing's really ready to film, so he has to spend like his first week in Jamaica driving around, securing locations and finishing sets, building props, building rubber flying fish and shit like that. So eventually they finally start shooting.
They sure were rubber.
Yes. They eventually start shooting. He only gets 4 days into the gig before the producer fires him, telling him that his footage doesn't cut together. I guess there's a couple stories about him basically dropping a camera in the ocean while filming a helicopter scene. That would get anybody fired, so I understand kind of why he may have gotten fired. He also missed some close-ups apparently, and this producer guy had to go reshoot a whole day's worth of footage. That's kind of the story of Cameron getting an opportunity to work on this movie. So basically Cameron's fired, he goes home, he's trying to even figure out if he can sue this producer over all this that happened, but he's got no money. I guess he's able to come back to Italy to check on something. I don't know, he's in Italy for some reason, and he knows the code to get into the edit suite. So he sneaks into the edit suite for like a week each night, re-edits the movie into a version that he prefers, which I guess is maybe available to see online. Supposedly he cuts out all the nudity, which is a shame because that was a couple of the scenes we enjoyed in this movie. So if he cut that, Cameron? Yeah, what a fool. I guess the producer, Asonitis, found out, recut the film back the way he wanted, presented it to Warner. Warner Brothers didn't like it and shelved the movie, and it took another 2 years before it finally hit cinemas, distributed by some porno company. The stress of this job and losing the job and stuff, apparently while he was in Italy doing this edit job on the movie, he was having a fever dream in his hotel, and he dreamt of the robot coming out of the fire that was the inspiration for Terminator, that he really stole from some guy in an Outer Limits episode. But anyway, I definitely think it, has a lot of the trademarks of a Cameron film. Even though he wasn't behind the camera, it does say that he wrote the screenplay with this producer, and even to some degree the original guy who was hired has some credit on that. So I don't know what ideas stick from what he put on paper, but it's got a very strong female lead, totally a Cameron-esque female lead, filled with blue lighting. The typical Cameron blue lighting is, it takes place under the water a lot, so you're just naturally going to get that.
Right from the beginning of this movie, you're underwater, it's blue lighting, and there's a fucking ship at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
If it's not, what's more Cameron than that? I thought it was cool. I thought it was really fun. It doesn't take itself as seriously as the first one. Piranha 2 was goofy fun, and it is just different enough from the first one.
B-movie fun, they give you just enough dialogue, exposition to tell you why we have flying piranha now and how it may be connected to whatever storyline there was in the first film. But really the films aren't really that connected, just other than that you've got more piranha carnage.
They're as connected as Predator 1 and 2 are, where there's a quick line of dialogue, 10 years ago, such and such happened and it was covered up.
But as you pointed out, like in Predator 2, Predator 2 somewhat quickly reveals the Predator and stops worrying about the mystery of what is the Predator. This film keeps the mystery of who's killing people going on a little longer than we need to for a sequel where we already know that it's the killer flying fish.
It's what sequels do, that when they remove themselves from the original movie and they start the mystery over again, it's insulting your viewer's intelligence, because the poster has flying piranhas. We know the movie's called Piranha 2. The opening scene showed a piranha eating some people. So why, as the viewer, do we have to follow the people on the mystery as they're figuring this out without ever getting to see the piranhas again? We already know what they're looking for. So 40 minutes of their investigation is quite boring to a viewer because we already know what they're looking for.
Drawing out the mystery, fill screen time. That's what the producer's thinking.
Yeah, and it's also an easy way to not
spend a lot of money because you just have people talking in rooms. Standard Godzilla syndrome.
Exactly.
You know?
Keep us on land. Oh, the other thing that's a total connection to James Cameron films is Lance Henriksen is the Chief Brody character in this film, ex-husband of our lead female character. The biggest thing besides Lance Henriksen being in the movie and kind of the look of the film at times is just that very strong female lead. It really is. And again, maybe Cameron didn't even write that character, but I kind of think he probably had a big hand in her turning out as believable and strong on screen as she really is.
Yeah. A strong woman who at the end of the movie, to save everyone, goes into the hive and blows it up. Where
did that idea come from?
The man, the husband guy, isn't the hero. He's the guy just going, get out of the water, while she's in there.
Another thing that he did on this film that's classic Cameron, he went over budget, according to the producer. Now, I don't know how his 4 days was but maybe dropping a camera in the ocean is enough to push the thing over budget. $389,000 off of $145,000 supposedly was spent on the actual film. But before he had this opportunity, he never went to film school. He basically just loved film like a lot of us and said, hey, I want to get involved with that. And after watching certain films, like he had always loved 2001, but apparently Star Wars and Halloween were two movies that made him say, I can do this. I want to get in the film industry. And he went and started working on special effects, working with Roger Corman. And, a couple years from late 70s, he was in the director's chair.
You said Roger Corman earlier, and I forgot that about him. Because sometimes you see filmmakers that become your favorite and you forget they worked with somebody else that was somebody really interesting in the business. This movie, Piranha 2, has kind of a Roger Corman feel to it as well. It doesn't hide the stupidity, and that's the charm of it, and that's a Corman movie.
Aliens is my favorite film ever. So, 2 films into his filmography, I was so hooked on this guy. Again, like you said, when you saw Point Break, you didn't necessarily know who the director was. I didn't necessarily know who James Cameron was. I may not even known that the same person who did Terminator did Aliens at that point in time, but by the time '89 Abyss had come out, I was familiar enough with those 2 films that I loved, that they were the same director, that this guy was magical, that he was amazing, and I was so ready for The Abyss to come out. I even remember reading some articles in whatever magazine. My 4 favorite films, the reason why James Cameron is the one I'm starting with, because there's a lot of filmmakers that I really respect and love their entire filmographies. And I could almost say that certain filmmakers at this point, because Cameron's dropped off to some degree, maybe should be considered my favorite filmmaker beyond Cameron. But when I sit down and talk about my favorite films, if I was to list the top 10, the first 4 are James Cameron movies. I can't get to another filmmaker before I get through Aliens, Terminator, Terminator 2, and The Abyss. Those 4 movies are perfection to me. So I just can't even move on to another filmmaker before I get to those 4 movies. And it's like 4 movies back to back that this guy made in this period of time that he kept every movie innovating and pushing the medium of film forward with each movie that he made. Now, beyond that, you get to True Lies. Fun, awesome movie. I love that movie. Titanic is a stone cold classic. Avatar is all right. Every film that he's ever made for me is a experience. You live it. You are in that world that he creates. Even if it's True Lies to some degree, you kind of feel the movie come to life right in front of you. Applying real science to movies, like making them come to life in a real way because he's applying the real world to his film. People always credit Cameron as being, one of the best action directors. But then I don't think they get why his action scenes are better than other action scenes. What it is about Cameron's action that makes it exciting is it's constantly building. The action scene keeps evolving. It's not just, someone needs to fight somebody and that fight scene's gonna end and we're just gonna go talk over here about something else. The situation keeps moving into the next phase. It's an ever building. When you think of like the end of Terminator 2, how it goes from Cyberdyne to the chase in the streets to the steel factory,
to the mall, to the fight, to the parking lot.
It's not a one location action scene, and it is actually makes sense why it moves and why it progresses and why cause and effect has a play on how the action scene plays out.
The reason they feel intimate in those action moments is because they're always checking in with the characters involved.
It's emotionally driven.
Whether it's through a line of dialogue or a facial expression or just a cutaway of what they're doing, you're always knowing exactly what John Connor is thinking when he's getting chased by that semi, and it puts you right in those shoes, as opposed to just being a spectacle stunt.
Yes.
You know, and when you're watching it, I was 13 or something when that came out. I felt like just like, you know, you're terrified for that scene, you know, because of those little things. And those are editing decisions too, but you have to shoot those scenes too.
Whether it's a romantic subplot or a child maybe involved in the film, but those connections always make it very emotional for whoever, you know, your hero is trying to save someone they love's life, usually to some degree in these movies, and it just makes, every movie has that maybe, but in these it works in an emotional way where it really grounds it in an emotional way where you're totally invested in these characters and you've got to see them succeed.
Both of our movies are not the movie where they were kind of set free to make. I'm not saying they didn't love the movies that they made. I don't think Cameron had a great time.
No.
But he probably learned a lot. He probably talked shit on it because that's the kind of guy he is. Bigelow, there's not much on her talking about Loveless. There's just not. She's not as big of a director, you know, in the zeitgeist as Cameron is, so it's harder to find stuff. But I do feel it was their second movies that really turned. You know, I said that about Wes Anderson too. His third movie, Royal Tenenbaums. That's the movie. That's the Wes Anderson creation right there.
Yeah.
And like with Terminator, that the character, the writing, it was the movie that would structure all his stuff from there forward. Not just the strong female character from the arc, because she's not strong at the beginning. Another one that you have to stick through. She's the damsel in distress. She's not actually. But then you have Michael Biehn's character who does everything that he does for her too, in this real gritty, you know, self-sacrificing way. So that to me, I mean, how do you not root for those characters in a movie? You know, and like, so yeah, I think that was the template moving forward with Cameron, because all Cameron's movies, I love the characters, the main characters.
Yeah.
All of them. Even fucking Jack and Rose, who some people hate, I love them.
I think his characters are all archetypes, you know, they're simple characterizations, sometimes, you know, caricatures of real people you might think. But in the context of the film and the story he's telling, which he creates a very believable world because of how his filmmaking style is, then these characters come to life within that. They become believable within the world you're seeing on screen. Maybe it's not the real world, but it's got enough realism applied to it that even if these are archetype characters or feel a little bit caricatured, like a Hudson or whatever, they still become grounded within the context of the tension, typically. Like, they're brought back to the real world because of the situation.
Yeah.
These first films that they got to make that, you know, it wasn't, they still didn't have complete control. They were still working on small budgets, working under studio control to some degree, had to put out, Terminator had to be a horror movie to be able to sell to some degree. A lot of the crew that he worked with on Aliens had worked on Top Secret and like Bond movies. But that's another area.
You mean when he went to shoot at what's it called, studios?
Pinewood
Studios, yeah.
And
they hated him.
Yeah, and apparently that was the first film where he was working in a bigger studio arena, but now he was being told to work with all these British crew that didn't like him.
Oh, and he was like, "What? Where the fuck are you going?" They're like, "It's tea time."
Yeah.
He's like, "Get the fuck back here."
From the moment that Bud and the scraggly dude in his underwear swim out, they both have to swim out and hold their breath to go.
Or something?
Yeah, I forget the name on him, but they have to swim out and try and make it over to the moon pool or whatever.
Yeah.
From the moment they gear up to do that to the moment they revive her is my favorite section of any film ever.
Yeah,
Aliens is my favorite movie, but that section, I think it's maybe almost like 25, 30 minutes of filmmaking.
Yeah, it's
is maybe my most intense favorite section of film ever created. One last little bit of trivia for James Cameron that everyone out there doesn't know. In 1998, Guillermo del Toro's father was kidnapped in Mexico, and James Cameron gave him over $1 million in cash to get his father back. James Cameron saves the world.
Just ask everyone that's ever worked with him.
They all love him. Well, that was our first episode of First of the Best. We hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found this somewhat fascinating.
Until next time, I'm Ben.
And I'm John.
And we
drink your cinema.